Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Gerald, and if you're hearing this, it's because I'm finally ready to tell the story I buried for far too long. I'm 38 years old, living in Sparks, Nevada with my wife Monica and our daughter Lila, who just turned 11. We live in a modest two-bedroom house with a leaky faucet and a backyard Monica's been trying to turn into a garden for years. It's not glamorous, but it's home. Or at least, it was. Before all this. I'm not telling you this story to get sympathy. I'm telling it so you understand what betrayal really feels like. Not the kind from strangers. No, the kind that guts you from the inside. The kind only family can deliver. Let's go back. My mother, Margaret, was the only constant I had growing up. My father, Raymond, was a construction mogul once, big contracts, big ego, and bigger gambling debts. He ran his company into the ground chasing blackjack dreams in Reno and Tahoe. He'd vanish for days, come home drunk, throw a few insults, and then disappear again. My younger brother, Troy, followed right in his footsteps. He worshipped our dad. Same fake bravado. Same love for poker tables. But not an ounce of responsibility. If Raymond was the storm, Troy was the wreckage he left behind. My mom. She was the shelter. She worked at a local diner just to keep food on the table. When Raymond lost the company and the house, she found us a small rental near Virginia Street. I was 16. I started washing dishes at the diner after school just so she could take fewer shifts. That's how I learned what it meant to provide for someone. And still, she loved them. Both of them. Even when they disappeared for weeks at a time. Even when they pawned her jewelry, just to get through the month. Even when they missed birthdays, anniversaries, everything that mattered. She never gave up on them. Not once. I tried. I really did. But when I left for college, on a scholarship I earned by working 2 jobs and graduating top of my class, I knew I had to cut ties with my father. Troy was harder. He was still just my little brother. Still calling me Big G with that stupid grin. But every time he borrowed money, every time he swore it was the last time, every time he relapsed, I lost another piece of faith in him. I graduated, became a foreman, and eventually manager at a decent construction company. I married Monica. She grounded me. Gave me a peace I never thought I'd earn. Then came Lila, our little spark of joy. Bright, fierce, too smart for her age. She got Margaret's eyes and my stubbornness. When Mom got diagnosed, stage 4 lung cancer, I was the only one there. Monica and I moved her into our home so she wouldn't die in some sterile hospital bed surrounded by strangers. Lila painted sunflowers on the bedroom walls to cheer her up. But Troy and Raymond? They didn't even show up. Not once. I called. I begged. I even went down to the Silver Strike Casino to drag them out once. But all Raymond could say was, "She always survives, Gerald. She's strong." And Troy? He laughed. Told me he'd stop by, if he wasn't busy. Mom died a week later. I was holding her hand when she took her final breath. And even then, even as her body grew cold, part of me still hoped they'd walk through the front door. But they never did. Not until the funeral. They showed up in wrinkled suits that smelled like whiskey and stale cigar smoke. Troy was hungover. Raymond kept checking his phone like he was waiting for a hot tip on a horse race. Not one tear. Not one apology. Just fake condolences and sideways glances at the crowd. After the service, I tried to stay composed. Monica was gripping my hand so tight it hurt. Lila stood by the casket and laid a yellow sunflower on it, whispering something only she and my mom would ever know. That should have been the end. But it wasn't. Because when we got home, while guests were still filtering in with casseroles and polite nods, Raymond cornered me in the kitchen with that snake oil smile he always wore before asking for money. "Gerald," he said, "your mom left behind a nice little insurance payout, didn't she? I mean, we should probably talk about splitting it up, you know, as a family." My jaw locked. My fists clenched so hard I thought I'd snap my own bones. "I paid those premiums for 10 years, I said coldly. "She made me the sole beneficiary. You and Troy weren't even in her will." Raymond scoffed. "That's not how family works, son. You don't hoard things like that." I looked him dead in the eye. "You weren't her family. Not when it mattered. That's when Troy barged in, drunk and loud. We deserve our cut, gee. Don't act like Mom didn't want us to have something. She wanted you to visit her when she was dying," I growled. "But you were too busy placing bets." Things escalated fast. There was shouting. Threats. Troy shoved a table over. Monica had to pull Lila away, tears in her eyes. My hands were trembling so hard I thought I might hit one of them. But I didn't. I told them both to get out. And as they stormed off, Raymond shouted one last thing over his shoulder. "This isn't over. You owe us. We'll make sure you pay." And that's when I realized the betrayal wasn't just that they ignored Mom when she needed them most. It's that they were planning, even before her body was cold, to take from her one last time. And I swore right then, I wouldn't let them. Grief is strange. People say it fades, that time makes it easier. But what no one tells you is that grief doesn't fade, it waits. In the quiet moments. In the pauses between conversations. In the dark just before you fall asleep. And it was in those silences that my anger grew. After the funeral, I tried to move forward. For Monica. For Lila. But every moment was like walking through fog. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., haunted by the sound of Mom's labored breathing in her final days. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to call her, then remember she was gone. Just like that. At first, Monica tried to keep the house calm, music, fresh food, even Lila's sketches pinned around the walls. But even she couldn't hide her unease after what happened in the kitchen. The shouting. The threats. Lila saw it all. And she didn't understand. "Why was Grandpa yelling?" she asked me one night. "He should be sad Grandma's gone, right?" What was I supposed to say? Because I didn't have an answer that made sense to a child. I barely had one for myself. I started locking the doors at night. Checking the windows twice. I moved the life insurance money into a protected trust fund for Lila, just in case. My lawyer, Devin Morales, a longtime friend from college, helped me set up every legal block I could think of. Restraining orders weren't an option yet, but Devin warned me. "If your father and brother are as desperate as you say, this isn't the last you'll hear from them. Watch your back, Gerald." He was right. 2 weeks after the funeral, I got a letter. No return address. Just a wrinkled envelope slipped through our mail slot. Inside, a photocopy of Margaret's original will, one I hadn't seen in over a decade. It named Raymond and Troy as partial beneficiaries. Problem was, that will was outdated. Mom had written a new one 5 years ago after Raymond stole her rent money and Troy pawned her wedding ring. That new will named me and only me. But the letter wasn't about truth. It was a threat. A note was scrawled at the bottom in Troy's handwriting. "Let's not make this messy, family splits things evenly. Or lawyers get involved." I crumpled the paper in my fist and threw it across the room. But my hands were shaking. It wasn't the lawsuit I feared, it was the fight. I didn't want to live the next year in court, reliving every moment of my mother's death just to prove Raymond and Troy didn't deserve a dime. And worse? They knew that. They were banking on the pain, the exhaustion, the emotional toll. They wanted me to cave. They wanted me to pay them to go away. And for a moment, I considered it. That's the part I'm most ashamed to admit. I started calculating what I could afford to give them without compromising Lila's future. Maybe a few thousand each. Enough to quiet them. To buy peace. But one night, as I stood in the hallway, I overheard Monica reading a bedtime story to Lila. Her voice was soft, but I could hear the smile in it. Lila laughed, just a little. And suddenly I remembered the night before the funeral, when Lila had drawn a picture of her grandma in heaven, watering sunflowers with a big silver watering can. She said she's gonna watch us from up there, Lila told me. And she said not to let the mean people win. I felt it in my gut, cold, electric clarity. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about honor. My mother's legacy. My daughter's future. My own peace. I went down to the basement and pulled out the old wooden box where Mom kept family letters and photos. In the back was her handwriting journal, a leather-bound book she wrote in during her last months. Flipping through it, I found the page I didn't know I needed. If they come for Gerald, if they try to hurt him after I'm gone, I hope he remembers who he is. Not my son. Not Raymond's. But his own man. A good one. I hope he fights, not with fists, but with truth. I closed the journal and stared at the floor for what felt like hours. Then I stood up and said the words that would change everything. They want a war. Then they're going to get one. But not the kind they expect. When you're raised by liars, you learn to read between the lines. My father and brother spoke in half-truths, manipulated like it was second nature. But they had one weakness, they always underestimated me. After I found Mom's journal, I couldn't stop thinking about one particular sentence. If they come for Gerald, I hope he fights, not with fists, but with truth. Truth. That word stuck to my ribs like old sorrow. So I called Devin, my lawyer, and told him to help me dig. Not just into legal files, but into everything. Probate records. Financial transactions. Casino debts. Bank accounts. If Raymond and Troy were going to come at me swinging, I wanted to know exactly how dirty their hands were. 3 days later, Devin called me, sounding like he was holding back a storm. Gerald, he said, I found something. Actually, I found a lot of somethings. I sat down in my car in the hospital parking lot, my hands gripping the wheel. Monica had just started her shift, and I had been planning to take Lila to the park. But now. What is it? I asked. Your father forged your mother's signature. More than once. He took out loans in her name. Used her social security number for credit cards. And Troy. He listed himself as a dependent on her old tax forms, 3 years in a row. Gerald, they didn't just betray her emotionally. They committed full-on financial fraud. I was speechless. But that's not the worst of it, Devin continued. I almost didn't want to hear it. But I needed to. There was a life insurance policy. A small one. Your mother opened it about 20 years ago, when you were still in college. She put your name on it originally. But 10 years ago, someone changed it. And guess who? My stomach dropped. Raymond. Devin sighed. He forged the paperwork and named himself the primary beneficiary. But then, 5 years ago, Margaret opened a new policy, completely separate. That's the one you've been paying into. And that one names you, legally and exclusively. I felt sick. Betrayal isn't always a blade, it can be slow, subtle. Like poison slipped into your drink. Can we prove the forgery? I asked. We already have. The notary on the original form came forward after I contacted her. She said Margaret told her Raymond tried to bribe her. She refused. He forged her signature anyway. For a moment, I sat there in silence, letting it all sink in. The rage. The deception. The fact that even after death, my mother was being robbed. Devin continued, "We could press charges, Gerald. Criminal charges." "No," I said, my voice like steel. "Not yet." He paused. "You want to play it out another way. I want them to come to me. I want them to think they're winning. And then I want them to feel what it's like when the ground disappears beneath them. Because now I had something they didn't. Proof. And a plan." That night, I walked into our living room where Monica was folding laundry and Lila was sketching the sky again. She always loved drawing stars before bed. Monica looked up. "You okay?" I nodded. "Better than I've been in a long time." "What happened?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Only resolve. "I just found out the truth. And now it's time to let them walk right into it." There's a calm that settles over you when you finally stop hoping someone will change, and start preparing to make them face what they've done. I wasn't out for blood. I wasn't out to destroy my father and brother just to see them fall. I was out for justice. For Mom. For Lila. For every quiet moment Monica spent holding my hand in the hospital while I pretended I wasn't breaking inside. Now I had what they didn't, the law, the documents, and something more powerful, strategy. I spent 2 full weeks preparing. First, I had Devin draft a letter. A formal legal response to Troy's veiled threat, the one with the old will. The letter looked cautious, almost conciliatory. It stated I was willing to explore a conversation regarding any potential claim, and invited them to meet me at a lawyer's office. Not Devin's office, though. I rented a neutral conference room in a shared workspace downtown. Cold lighting. Big table. Legal ambience. Next, I contacted a friend of Monica's, a private investigator named Clara Wu. Retired military. Ice in her voice. She owed Monica a favor from nursing school. Clara's job. Follow Troy. Document his movements. Get pictures. Videos. Receipts. Everything. Within 5 days, Clara had what we needed. Troy was still gambling, daily. Still borrowing money from questionable people. But what really burned? He was bragging. Clara got video of him at a bar, drunk and shouting to his friends, "Once we squeeze my big bro for Mom's money, I'm outta here. Gonna get that Dodge Challenger I've been wanting." I had her transcribe the video. Then I had Devin file a preliminary cease and desist to freeze any legal action they might attempt against the estate until formal fraud investigations were reviewed. Everything was lining up. But the most painful part of the plan was visiting the house where Mom had spent her last days. Our house. I walked into her old bedroom, still untouched. The walls were still painted in soft yellow. Lila's sunflowers still bright in the corners. I sat on her bed and whispered, "They're coming, Mom. But I'm ready this time." And then, just before I left, I pulled out the final piece of the plan. A video. Not one I filmed. One Mom had made herself. On my phone. She'd recorded it during a rare clear day near the end of her illness. I remembered her asking for my phone, saying she wanted to say something, just in case. I'd forgotten it was still saved in the cloud. In it, she looked frail. Her skin was pale. But her voice. It was fire. "If you're watching this, it means they came crawling after I'm gone. Raymond, Troy, you don't get to hurt Gerald anymore. He stood by me when no one else did. I want everything to go to him. Everything. You lost the right to ask for anything the moment you stopped being there." It was time-stamped. Clear. Devastating. And I knew exactly when to play it. 2 days later, they walked into the conference room like they owned the place. Raymond was wearing a suit 2 decades too old for him. Troy wore sunglasses indoors and a smirk that made me want to throw the table across the room. Nice digs, Troy muttered. Big G makin' lawyer money now. I didn't rise to the bait. Just gestured to the seats. Let's talk, I said evenly. Devin sat beside me. A court stenographer across from us. Legal pads. Audio recorder. All very official. Raymond leaned forward, fake sincerity dripping from every syllable. Look, son. We don't want this to get ugly. Let's be civil, like family. Split the policy, walk away with peace. Devin slid a file across the table. We reviewed your claims, he said smoothly. And unfortunately for you, there's substantial evidence to the contrary. Troy scoffed. What evidence? Devin leaned back and smiled. How about forged signatures? Tax fraud? Video footage of intent to defraud an estate? Or maybe. He tapped his phone. The video played. Mom's voice filled the room. Raymond, Troy, you don't get to hurt Gerald anymore. The air changed. Raymond's face went pale. Troy sat back in his chair like he'd just been slapped. When the video ended, I spoke. You wanted to drag me through court. You wanted to lie about who Mom loved. You just lost everything. Raymond tried to speak. Tried to lie again. But I held up my hand. This was never about the money. It was about her. About finally ending the cycle. Devin placed one more folder on the table. Here are the fraud charges we're prepared to file. Unless you walk away. Today. Forever. They didn't speak. Not then. Not when we left. But I saw it in their eyes. For the first time in their lives, they realized they'd lost. And I hadn't even raised my voice. They left the meeting in silence, but silence doesn't mean surrender. The next 24 hours were like waiting for lightning to strike. I didn't sleep. I lay awake in bed, eyes locked on the ceiling, wondering what they'd do. Because men like Raymond and Troy, men who mistake arrogance for power, don't back down. They lash out. And I was right. The next morning, Monica was brushing Lila's hair before school when our doorbell rang. I opened it to find a sheriff's deputy standing there with a grim expression and a folded document in his hand. Mr. Gerald Foster. Yes. You've been served. He handed me the papers, civil suit. Raymond and Troy were suing me for unlawful withholding of family inheritance. It was laughable. They had no legal standing. No claim. But they were counting on the stress, the cost, the mess of dragging me through court. And that's when I knew, I couldn't just defend anymore. I had to strike back. Devin and I filed a counterclaim that afternoon. Not just to dismiss their suit, but to pursue criminal fraud, elder abuse, and attempted extortion. I submitted Mom's video. The bank records. The notary's testimony. Clara Wu's surveillance logs. The whole mountain. And then I did something that made Monica's jaw drop. I called a reporter. His name was Miguel Vargas. Local Reno News. I'd read his op-ed once about elder exploitation and the quiet epidemic of family fraud. I asked to meet. We sat at a corner booth in a dusty diner, the same place Mom used to work. I laid everything out, the story, the betrayal, the fake will, the video. I didn't ask for pity. I asked for exposure. You sure you want to go public with this? Miguel asked, flipping through the file. You know your father and brother are going to retaliate. This could get ugly. They already made it ugly, I said. Now I want the world to see what they are. Miguel ran the story under the headline. Son protects dying mother's legacy after estranged family tries to steal her final gift. It went viral locally within days. Suddenly, the court of public opinion wasn't on Raymond and Troy's side anymore. Social media flooded with support. Old friends of Mom's posted memories. Neighbors commented things like, "Margaret always loved Gerald. I saw what those other two did to her." The pressure built fast. Raymond called me one night, his voice trembling, not with regret, but with fury. "You think you're smart? Think humiliating me in the paper makes you righteous? You've always been a sanctimonious little." I hung up. And the next morning, something happened that I never expected. Troy showed up at my job. I was walking into a staff meeting when I saw him leaning against my truck, pale, shaking, bags under his eyes like he hadn't slept in weeks. "Gee, please." My co-workers watched from a distance. I motioned him to step aside with me. "What do you want?" I asked flatly. Troy's voice cracked. "I didn't know he was gonna go that far. I thought we'd get some money, walk away. I didn't think you'd actually." "Actually what?" "Defend myself. Defend Mom." He swallowed hard. "I was wrong, all right. I was messed up. I still am. But I don't want to be like him anymore." I stared at him, unsure if this was another manipulation. But then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a printed apology. A signed confession. "I wrote it this morning. I'm giving it to your lawyer. If it means I can start over, I'll do it. I don't want to be part of this anymore." I took it. "Read it." And nodded. "Then start walking." That afternoon, Troy withdrew from the lawsuit. Admitted to everything. Raymond was left alone. No support. No allies. No credibility. And that's when the final blow came. Devin filed for a court injunction that froze all of Raymond's remaining assets, including what little he had left in his casino-linked accounts. We also filed for a lifetime no-contact order. The judge scheduled a hearing. And I knew the moment had come. I wasn't just defending anymore. I was finishing this. The morning of the court hearing, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the tie in my hands. I hadn't worn it since Mom's funeral. It was navy blue, her favorite color. Lila tiptoed in and sat beside me, quiet for a moment before she asked, "Are you going to see Grandpa today?" I nodded. "Will he be nice?" I looked into her eyes, so full of hope, of things I hadn't seen in my father since I was a child. "No, baby. But I'll be strong. For Grandma. For us." She reached into her little backpack and handed me a piece of paper. "I drew this. Just in case you forget why you're doing it." It was a drawing of our family, me, Monica, Lila, and Grandma Margaret, standing tall, smiling under a tree of sunflowers. I folded it gently and slid it into my coat pocket. The courtroom wasn't packed, but the energy inside was tense. Devin and I sat on one side. Across from us, Raymond slouched in his chair, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. His suit hung loose. His hands trembled. Alone. Troy wasn't there. Instead, he had submitted his signed affidavit, which the judge now held in his hands. When the judge called the hearing to order, everything moved quickly. Evidence presented. Signatures authenticated. Financial fraud explained in full. But then came the twist. Raymond stood up and addressed the judge directly, ignoring his court-appointed attorney. "Your Honor," he said, voice low but clear, "I want to drop the lawsuit." Everyone turned. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" Raymond's jaw clenched. "I want to drop the case. I've lost. I know that now. But before this ends, I want to say something." The judge allowed it. He turned to face me. "I hated you, Gerald," he said. "Because you were everything I couldn't be. Steady. Honest. Loved. Your mother, she never gave up on me, not even when I deserved it. And you were her mirror. And I hated that. He paused, swallowing hard. But seeing you do what I never could. Stand by your family, protect what matters. I know now that you were the son she was proud of. Not me. Not Troy. You. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat tightened with years of swallowed hurt. Then Raymond turned to the judge. I'll sign anything you want. Just, make sure that money goes where Margaret would have wanted. The courtroom fell silent. When we stepped outside, I expected Devon to say something, some legal note or pat on the back, but he just handed me Lila's drawing. You brought the real proof to court today, he said quietly. Right here. I smiled and folded it again, tucking it into my pocket like armor. I thought that was the end. But the reversal wasn't over. Because a few days later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000. No note. Just a sticky tab on the envelope that read. For Lila's future. Don't waste it on lawyers. T. It was from Troy. A man who once tried to rob me of everything had just tried, maybe for the first time in his life, to give something back. That night, I sat with Monica under the porch light, watching Lila chase fireflies in the yard. I showed her the check, still not quite believing it myself. What do we do with this? She asked. I stared out at the darkening horizon. We plant something with it, I said. Something that lasts. The leaves had started to turn gold by the time we put the final nail in the past. 3 weeks after the hearing, I stood in front of a quiet plot of land just outside Sparks, 5 acres, tucked against a ridge where wildflowers grew in the spring. Monica held my hand. Lila clutched her sketchbook against her chest. And behind us stood a small crew of volunteers, some from the hospital where Monica worked, some from my construction company, and a few old friends of Mom's. We were there to break ground on what I'd decided to build with the money Troy had sent. Not a house. Not a monument. But a community garden. I called it Margaret's Grove. The sign out front would say, for those who gave love without asking for anything in return. Troy hadn't asked for credit. He hadn't contacted me again. But I kept the original envelope in my drawer, proof that even the most broken branches could sprout something new. As the garden began to take shape, I found a kind of peace I never knew I'd get. Raymond stayed quiet. I heard he'd checked into a rehab center up north. Someone told me he'd started attending group therapy for gambling addiction. I didn't follow up. I didn't need closure from him anymore. The closure had already come. It came in the form of Lila laughing as she planted sunflower seeds. It came in Monica's warm smile when she handed out lemonade to volunteers. It came in the dirt under my nails and the ache in my back from building something with purpose. And then, one crisp Saturday morning, a letter arrived. Handwritten. From Troy. Gerald. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't think I've earned that. But I needed you to know that I'm trying. I've been sober 58 days. I go to meetings. I even got a part-time job fixing bikes. Sarah, the girl I told you about, we're still together. She's the one who convinced me to write you. Said the only way to move forward is to face the wreckage you left behind. What you did, protecting Mom, standing your ground, building something out of everything we destroyed. That's real strength. I was too proud to admit it before. Tell Lila I still remember the sunflower she gave Mom at the funeral. I think about it every time I feel like giving up. I'm not asking for a second chance. Just wanted you to know. I'm proud of you. And I hope, one day, I can make you proud too. Troy. I read the letter twice before showing it to Monica. She teared up. Maybe there's hope after all. There always is, I said. It just doesn't always look the way we expect. That fall, we hosted a harvest festival at Margaret's Grove. Families came with picnic blankets. Local musicians played soft acoustic sets. We built a wooden bench near the tallest sunflower patch and engraved it with her name. Lila placed her drawing, our family under a tree of sunflowers, into a weatherproof frame and set it next to the bench. "She's still watching," Lila whispered. "I feel it." I nodded, kneeling beside her. "She is. And I think she's smiling." As the sun dipped below the hills, casting golden light across the garden, I felt something deep inside me loosen. A quiet forgiveness, not for Raymond or Troy, but for myself. For holding on so tightly to pain. For believing that protecting my family meant doing it alone. I finally understood. Justice doesn't always look like a courtroom victory. Sometimes, it's a child's drawing on a bench. Sometimes, it's peace. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.